Hello, Louisa. Hello, Julie. Welcome, everybody. We'll give it a few minutes for people to join in. Hello, Mary and Jason. Good evening, Jayantha. Good morning, Venushka. Hello, Yankee, Sud. Give it another minute or so, then we'll get started. Hello, Lilani. Hello, Dharma Learner. Please pace yourself. Well, I do pace myself. I only overdo it when I'm covering for other monastics. When I'm just doing my own stuff, it's quite nicely paced. It's not too bad. It is what it is. All right. I think we can get started. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Hello, friends. I'll be covering this Wednesday, obviously, and also next Wednesday, the 15th. I'll be covering on these days. And I wanted to go over the topic of the 7 factors of awakening today. 7 factors of awakening are a group that the Buddha does talk about. But one thing I think should be kind of clear is that they're not like a separate group of things to practice. Indeed, if you're following the Noble Eightfold Path, you're developing these 7 factors. Towards the end of the talk, after we've gone through the 7 factors, we're going to read little bit from the Anapanasati Sutta, where the Buddha says that mindfulness of breathing fulfills the four foundations of mindfulness, and the four foundations of mindfulness fulfills the seven factors of awakening. There's a whole other factors of awakening. There's 37, of which the seven factors of awakening is part of that. So I want to give a start by sharing a screen. Window. So this is a bunch of years ago, I went on this tangent of making mind maps for the various lists and major things, major groupings. And so I made this one for the seven factors of awakening. And I want to show a few things regarding this. The first, we'll go up top here. So pretty much most of the chunk of the seven factors of awakening that are in the suttas are in these two groupings. The Majjhima Nikaya number 118, Anapanasati Sutta, and in the Samyutta Nikaya, there's a whole Samyutta devoted just to Bojjhanga Samyutta. That's what it's called, the Factors of Awakening Samyutta. So if you go on like Sutta Central or wherever you go to your suttas, if you go to the 46th Samyutta, then that whole chapter, that whole grouping is all about the seven factors of awakening. So let's see a few things that the Buddha says in regards to the seven factors of awakening. Bhikkhus, just as all the rafters of a peaked house slant, slope, and incline towards the roof peak, so too, when a bhikkhu develops and cultivates the seven factors of awakening, he slants, slopes, and inclines towards Nibbana. Hence why they're called factors of awakening. Right? When you develop these factors, he slants, slopes, and inclines towards awakening. I believe there's another simile where he uses the just how the Ganges slants and slopes out to the ocean the same way. So the other one, very short. Both of these are from the Bojjhanga Samyutta, and they're literally just a paragraph or two, very short. So, bhikkhus, I will teach you the path crushing the army of Mara. Listen to that. And what, bhikkhus, is the path crushing the army of Mara? It's the seven factors of awakening. So these are no slouches, right? The Buddha tells us very much so how important these factors are in developing them. And I'm not going to go over, I'm not going to read these descriptions because we're actually going to read them when we read through Anapanasati section. But the first one, we'll just briefly go through them in the list, and then I'll go into more detail with each one. First one is sati, mindfulness. Of course, it starts with mindfulness. Next one is Dhamma Vichaya, investigation of Dhammas, or investigation of all phenomena. Next one is virya, energy or effort. Next is piti, joy or rapture. And the Buddha describes these in a linear fashion, starting with mindfulness. And after piti is passaddhi, tranquility. After tranquility is samadhi. And after samadhi is upekkha, equanimity. So already you can see where, maybe these terms are familiar for you. Either in terms of samadhi jhanic practices, mindfulness, vipassana, developing practices. Right? These are not some kind of separate alien list all to themselves. These are all part of the Noble Eightfold Path. Right mindfulness, right concentration, right effort. These are all there. So that's an important thing to understand here. It's not, again, it's not some alien extra thing. It's, you could say, a different way of grouping. Right? Factors you're familiar with in other places are grouped here together as factors of awakening. I'm going to stop sharing that for now. Hello, Manal, Kumu, Bhumika, and Andy. So let's talk about all the 7 factors. The first one is sati. And it just has to be that way. It has to be sati. Why? Because a good chunk of these qualities and factors were already known and practiced before the Buddha. The Buddha mastered these, like samadhi. But the Buddha's gift to the world, that last key that he needed to become fully awakened, was sati, mindfulness. And this is, again, it's not a surprise that it's first, because everything else is a basis from mindfulness. You might even say, well, how is a samadhi a basis for mindfulness? There's a very small sutta in the Anguttara Nikaya, literally just a paragraph, where the Buddha says, to subdue the 5 hindrances, practice satipatthana. What are the 5 hindrances? They hinder us from getting into jhanas. And we see this quite easily in the Noble Eightfold Path, don't we? 7th factor is sammasati. 8th factor is sammasamadhi. And the Buddha says that sammasamadhi is supported by all the other 7 factors of the Noble Eightfold Path. So this is why it's quite obvious that mindfulness comes first. Let's look at from a practical perspective. What happens when you're mindful of things? What happens? You start to notice things that you didn't see before. You weren't paying attention, right? You're just going on autopilot, like a zombie. Not really paying attention to this mind and body, to the nature of reality. But the minute you start to be mindful, whole other aspects of whatever you're looking at arise. This is one of what I call the superpowers of mindfulness. The simile I always use is that a person could be in a room or in a situation with 6 other people, and they're trying to figure out what to do about a certain situation. And because you practice mindfulness, because you develop satipatthana, you see more options. You see more ways of doing things, more skillful ways, usually. So you start seeing things that you didn't see before. This is what makes a person, this is wisdom and insight. This is how somebody can act very wisely in the world. An unmindful person doesn't have much wisdom power to act skillfully in the world. So this is very important. This is why mindfulness is what helps us to develop the mind states of vipassana. V is to thoroughly, deeply. Passana is to see. Vipassana means to see deeply, to see thoroughly, to see the nature of existence, the characteristics. So mindfulness is the basis. Mindfulness is the foundation. Without mindfulness, there's no path to awakening. This was the Buddha's gift to the world. So, what happens when you start to see things you didn't see before? What happens when you're doing some walking meditation or breath meditation, and you start to see the physicalities of that? You're walking, and normally you're just feeling the feeling of the feet pressing against the ground, but you're so deeply mindful that you start to feel and understand the tendons moving, right, in your calves. Or you're following your breath and you're so mindful and so focused on the breath that you start to see the breath changing. Right? This is seeing things in a more subtle way. What usually happens when you start to see things you haven't seen before? Seeing more subtle, things you're not really familiar with. You become curious. Your curiosity is piqued. And when your curiosity is piqued, what do you want to do? Want to investigate. The second factor of awakening, Dhammavicaya, investigation of all phenomena. Those of you who've been around me enough, you've heard me use the word investigation a lot. A lot. I use it a lot. And this is the reason. It's one of the factors of awakening. The Buddha tells us to know dukkha, to abandon tanha, right? We are to know the first noble truth. We are to abandon the second noble truth, abandon our craving. We are to know our suffering. How do we know that? Well, we have to investigate it. We have to see it deeply. We have to really know. This is what allows us to see and understand more deeply, more subtly, and with more insight. If you have the mindset, I was just talking to somebody here in Colorado, and I was explaining to them that I just kind of, even before I was into Buddhism, I just had this natural investigative mindset. I just want to know how everything works and question everything and try to find the truth and all this. And even all these years later, that's what I still do. That doesn't end. Investigating doesn't end until you become awakened. And so as long as you're on the path, you should be investigating. Investigating what? Everything. As long as you're awake, you can investigate with mindfulness any experience you have. There's not one experience you can't. So if you develop the mindset, the attitude, you wake up in the morning and you say, okay, if I really put my mind to it, I could do nothing but investigating things every second of the day until I go back to sleep. Problems at work, conversations with other people, stuck in traffic, stuck in line at the grocery store, having a walk with a loved one, eating, sleeping, defecating, exercising, sexual activity, whatever it is, you can investigate it. You name it, I've investigated. I've done it with mindfulness. That's the way, that's the attitude, that's the way to start to really understand, to really see things deeply. The mindset that you're an investigator. Maybe you can think of yourself as like a police detective or a scientist. Whatever it is. But the attitude of investigation is very important for following the Noble Eightfold Path. If we're not mindful and we're not investigating, well, then we're not seeing things as they are. This is why so many of, you ask me a question and I say, investigate it. I'm not trying to do it as a cop out, but that's pretty much almost always the answer. Right? Almost always the answer is investigate it some more. Look at it from this angle, look at it from that angle. Understand that what the Buddha is, the Buddha gives us various frameworks to investigate. Investigate the rise, the persistence, and the ceasing of everything. Right? The rise and fall. Investigate the gratification, the danger, and the escape. All these different ways that the Buddha gives us to use as tools of investigation. This is very, very important. And so, when you are deeply curious and you're deeply investigating something, what else is there usually? Maybe you're deeply involved in, I don't know, you're writing, you do something very meaningful and you feel like you don't even need to sleep. Right? When mindfulness is active, when investigation is active, you have virya, energy. When you are actively investigating, you can have such large pools of energy because of your curiosity, because of your attitude of investigation. Oh, let me see this, let me see that. And indeed, even if you are, even if maybe you are so caught up by Mara, you're in such negative mind states, such such negative, aversive experiences that it's really hard to be mindful. Usually, at minimum, you have enough energy to just watch, to observe, to investigate. Maybe you have some kind of bad habit that you use as a coping mechanism, and you're in a dark time, and the coping mechanism just takes over. Even though you try, it's unskillful, and you try not to do it, your willpower is gone. And so all you can do is investigate. You have just that little bit of energy. Or even if you're really, really sick, right? Being sick is one of the most important times to be able to practice. Even if your mind is muddled and your body's tired, you can have a little bit of energy, a teeny bit of energy to investigate, to be somewhat mindful. So you see here, this is energy that's not arising because you go out and do some exercise, you pump yourself up. Oh yeah, I got all kinds of energy. That is a kind of energy, but this is not the energy. This is not the same as virya, energy or effort, putting in effort. The word kind of means like the energy of a strong man, kind of a thing. Like those similes where the strong man takes the weaker man and can do as they wish. Right? This is like a very powerful thing to have. It also helps you to keep going. Right? You're curious, you're mindful, you're investigative, you have that zeal and that energy. And so you keep going. And then once you're in that state, piti arises. Piti is translated as joy or rapture. This state is usually seen in conjunction with the jhanas, right? The first and second jhanas. This is not something of the body, not a feeling or a sensation. This is why the Buddha says that jhana, there's nothing to be afraid of jhanas. The qualities that arise in jhana are not from chasing the senses, not from chasing after pleasant experiences. Right? The first lines of jhana are quite secluded from sensual pleasures, secluded from unwholesome states. And that's piti in the jhanas. Piti here is somewhat the same, but also different, because you technically don't need to be in jhanas to experience piti. But this is a joy, a rapture, a pleasure of the mind that arises while you are investigating with mindfulness and energy. Then after that arises pasadi, tranquility. This is tranquility of mind. The mind is starting to settle down, to calm down. Maybe you've had that experience of being mindfully investigating something, but your mind wants to go somewhere else, or experience somewhere else, or go watch TV, or get something to drink, or food, or whatever. Right? So the mind is not fully focused and settled and calmed yet. Now, pasadi, tranquility, calmness of mind is arising. And then, as the mind becomes calm, you have samadhi. Samadhi is translated usually as concentration, although I think more modern translations like stillness are probably more accurate. Or like a unification of mind on the object. Because that's what samadhi is. You're very focused on the object of investigation. Your mind is not going here or there. Your mind is concentrated, focused. And then once samadhi is established, you see this quality in the fourth jhana, a little bit in the third, and in the fourth is upekkha, equanimity. Equanimity is a mind that is not fluttering between likes and dislikes, running after pleasure, running away from pain. A mind that's, for lack of a better word, indifferent to all things that are happening other than what you're focusing on. In the third jhana, we see the beginning of mindfulness and equanimity, and in the fourth jhana, it is perfected. The fourth jhana, there's no likes, dislikes, there's no pain and pleasure, there's just mindfulness and equanimity. Equanimity is a very important quality. It's a quality that allows us to move through a lot of our delusion and a lot of distractions, so we can really see things as they are. So let's go to Anapanasati Sutta. Let's see who's joined. Adrian, Metika, Suzanne, welcome. Just double checking something here. Actually, the 7 Factors of Awakening section doesn't have the explanations that I wanted. It just so I'm going to go back to the mind map, and we'll read through it. Hello, Jang, Narcans. So, and here you'll see the clear kind of linearity, how one is comes in after the other. Sati. On whatever occasion, the monk remains focused on the body, feeling, mind, or mind objects in and of itself. So this is satipatthana, ardent, alert, and mindful, putting aside greed and distress with reference to the world. On that occasion, his mindfulness is steady and without lapse. When his mindfulness is steady and without lapse, then mindfulness as a factor of awakening becomes aroused. He develops it, and for him, it goes to culmination of its development. Remaining mindful in this way, he examines, analyzes, and comes to a comprehension of that quality with discernment. When he remains mindful in this way, examining, analyzing, and coming to comprehension of that quality with discernment, then the analysis of qualities as a factor for awakening becomes aroused. He develops it, and for him, it goes to culmination of its development. In one who examines, analyzes, and comes to a comprehension of that quality with discernment, persistence is aroused unflaggingly. When persistence, so this is virya, energy, effort, persistence, that's not a bad way. That's not a bad translation for virya. It's a bit off, but close enough. Effort is probably better. But when persistence is aroused unflaggingly in one who examines and analyzes and comes to a comprehension of that quality with discernment, that persistence as a factor of awakening becomes aroused. He develops it, and for him, it goes to culmination of its development. In one whose persistence is aroused, a rapture not of the flesh. So this is Nirisa, Nimisa, and V. Oh, trying to remember the Pali. But you see this actually the same words used in Satipatthana under Vedana. So this is not of the flesh, non-carnal, not of the body. Again, like I was saying, it's of the mind. A rapture not of the flesh arises. When a rapture not of the flesh arises in one whose persistence is aroused, then rapture as a factor of awakening becomes aroused. He develops it, and for him it goes to culmination of its development. Pasadi. For one enraptured at heart, the body grows calm and the mind grows calm. When the body and mind of a monk enraptured at heart grow calm, then serenity as a factor of awakening becomes aroused. He develops it, and for him it goes to the culmination of its development. Samadhi. For one who is at ease, his body calm, the mind becomes concentrated. When the mind of one who is at ease, his body calm, becomes concentrated, then concentration as a factor of awakening becomes aroused. He develops it, and for him it goes to culmination of its development. Upekkha. He carefully watches the mind, thus concentrated, with equanimity. When he carefully watches the mind, thus concentrated with equanimity, equanimity as a factor for awakening becomes aroused. He develops it, and for him it goes to culmination of its development. Hello, PL. I see your question, Sud. We'll answer it in a bit when we get to the Q&A section. So, as I said in the beginning, the Buddha says in the Anapanasati Sutta that Anapanasati, mindfulness of breathing, fulfills Satipatthana, the four foundations of mindfulness, and the four foundations of mindfulness fulfills Bojjhanga, the seven factors of awakening. So let's read how that does. We'll go to Anapanasati Sutta now. Hello, Chani on Facebook. All right. Fulfillment of the 7 enlightenment factors. And how, bhikkhus, do the 4 foundations of mindfulness developed and cultivated fulfill the 7 enlightenment factors? Bhikkhus, on whatever occasion a bhikkhu abides contemplating the body as body, ardent, fully aware, and mindful, having put away covetousness and grief for the world, on that occasion unremitting mindfulness is established in him. On whatever occasion unremitting mindfulness is established in a bhikkhu, on that occasion the mindfulness enlightenment factor is aroused in him. Abiding thus mindful, he investigates and examines that state with wisdom and embarks upon a full inquiry into it. On whatever occasion, abiding thus mindful, a bhikkhu investigates and examines that state with wisdom and embarks on a full inquiry of it. On that occasion, the investigation states of factor is aroused in him, and he develops it, and by development, it comes to fulfillment in him. And one who investigates and examines that state with wisdom and embarks upon a full inquiry into it, tireless energy is aroused. On whatever occasion tireless energy is aroused in a bhikkhu who investigates and examines that state with wisdom and embarks on a full inquiry into it, on that occasion energy enlightenment factor is aroused in him, and he develops it. In one who has aroused energy, unworldly rapture arises. On whatever occasion unworldly rapture arises in a bhikkhu who has aroused energy, on that occasion the rapture enlightenment factor arouses in him, and he develops it, and by development it comes to fulfillment. In one who is rapturous, the body and mind become tranquil. On whatever occasion the body and mind become tranquil, in a bhikkhu who is rapturous, on that occasion the tranquility enlightenment factor is aroused in him, he develops it, and comes to fulfillment. In one whose body is tranquil or who feels pleasure, the mind becomes concentrated. On whatever occasion the mind becomes concentrated in a bhikkhu whose body is tranquil and feels pleasure, on that occasion the concentration enlightenment factor is aroused in him. He closely looks on with equanimity at the mind thus concentrated. All right. So here was the section I wanted to talk. So that was a bit of a repeat from what we just read. Let's see. Okay, so bhikkhus, on whatever occasion a bhikkhu abides contemplating feelings as feelings, ardent, fully aware, and mindful. So this is the second satipatthana. Having put away covetousness and grief for the world. And then repeating the 7. On whatever occasion a bhikkhu abides contemplating mind as mind, ardent, fully aware, and mindful, having put away covetousness and grief for the world. Repeating the 7 again. On whatever occasion a bhikkhu abides contemplating mind objects as mind objects, so fourth satipatthana. You can tell this is an older translation. Bhikkhu Bodhi doesn't use mind objects anymore, but this is a very common translation from a little bit older times. So, fully aware and mindful, having put away covetousness and grief for the world, repeat the 7 factors again. So when you are developing the 7 factors, you are also developing each of the 4 satipatthana. When you're mindful and investigating, you're investigating the body, you're investigating feeling, you're investigating mind, you're investigating principles. So all 4 have this. And so in the end, then after you've developed, after the line, it goes, mindfulness of breathing fulfills 4 foundations of mindfulness. 4 foundations of mindfulness fulfill 7 factors of awakening. 7 factors of awakening fulfills true knowledge and deliverance. Have you ever heard of the tenfold path? Yeah, the noble tenfold path. Bhante J called this the upper middle path. This is for one who has developed the 7 factors of awakening, become awakened. The eightfold path turns into the tenfold path, with knowledge and liberation being the last 2. And how bhikkhus do the 7 enlightenment factors developed and cultivated fulfill true knowledge and deliverance. Here, bhikkhus, a bhikkhu develops the mindfulness enlightenment factor, which is supported by seclusion, dispassion, cessation, and ripens in relinquishment. He develops the investigation of states enlightenment factor, energy, rapture, tranquility, concentration, equanimity enlightenment factor, which is supported by seclusion, dispassion, cessation, and ripens in relinquishment. Bhikkhus, this is how the 7 factors of enlightenment factors developed and cultivated fulfill the true knowledge and deliverance. This is what the Blessed One said. Bhikkhus were satisfied and delighted with the Blessed One's words. All right, friends. So to sum up, these 7 factors of awakening work together in developing the qualities needed to end your samsara journey, to fulfill the Noble Eightfold Path. And these qualities are not necessarily something you need to think of in your daily practice as separate things. If you're following the Noble Eightfold Path, if you're developing Anapanasati, you're developing Satipatthana, then you are developing the 7 factors of awakening. So this is an important grouping that I wanted to discuss today. I think we would call an end to the talk now, and we can move on to the question and answer period. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. All right. Okay, I see a few questions already. PL says, are 7 factors of enlightenment essentially an alternative expression of the combination of the last 2 steps of the Noble Eightfold Path, right mindfulness and right concentration? I think that sounds pretty accurate. Yeah, I would go for that. Yeah, I don't know if I have anything else to say with that. I mean, it seems to fit nicely in those last 2 factors. And of course, the last factor is supported by all of the other factors of the Noble Eightfold Path. So if you're doing the full path, your factors are all supportive of each other, and you're developing your factors of awakening. Sud says, Dear Bhante, I heard one can use metta to investigate the 7 factors of awakening. How does one go about this? Use metta to investigate the 7 factors of awakening. I've never heard this before. Do you have anything to add to that to clarify it a bit? Use metta to investigate the 7 factors of awakening. I'm trying to think in my mind how that would work. Trying to connect some dots. Nothing's coming up. Mm. The only thing that's coming up in my mind is, you know, using self metta to get through the to be able to patiently endure things, to investigate them. That is one thing I guess I had thought of talking about, but I guess in the flow of the talk it never came out. When it comes to investigation, right? The Buddha says that my disciples endure hot, cold, rain, bugs, insults from people, etc. Right? Patience and patient endurance is the best practice. To be able this is an important quality to be able to develop so that you can endure and investigate with painful and unpleasant things. You learn a lot when you're able to do that. Let's see if there's any clarification. I think we'll move on. And then, Sud, if I see a clarification, I'll address it again. Chandni says, how can I control my monkey mind, Venerable? You can't. If you try to control it, you ever try to grab a monkey? Or in my experience, I've never actually been around monkeys to grab them, but try to grab a chicken. You're trying to grab something that's this kind of really fast, Weasley kind of animal that slips through your fingers. Right? If you try to control it, it doesn't work. This is why one of the reasons why I don't like the translation of concentration for samadhi, because when we think of concentration, mostly we think like this. I'm really concentrating really strongly. And that's not what this practice is about. That's not what these factors, especially the samadhi and the tranquility factors that are arising. That's not what this is about. What you do is follow your breath. You tranquilize your mind and your body. If you're tranquilizing your mind and your body, then naturally your monkey mind will settle down. It will subside. If you're being mindful and investigating in a very energetic way, if you're, able to calm and able enough to keep your mind while you're practicing mindfulness of breathing, and you're keeping your mind on your breath, and you get distracted, you come back, distracted, you come back. As you do that over and over again, the mind starts to become calm. You're training your mind to stay on the breath. And so the monkey mind just fades away. It goes quiet. There's no crushing, forcing the monkey mind. The more you fight it, the more energy it gets. Just like the famous anger-eating demon. Kumu says, Bhante, all this means that most of the path can be practiced off the cushion while living even a lay life. Yes, most of the path is off the cushion. This is why this is why I don't think anybody who says you should be meditating, whatever, 12 hours a day. I mean, that can be good for developing some samadhi, some samatha. But where are you investigating? Right? How are you, and you might hide in a cave for months, doing your samadhi all day, every day, and you may feel like even like you're awakened. And then you go out and you have to go out and deal with people and you see agitation arise in your mind. You're like, nope, not awakened. So yes, most of the practice is off the cushion. That doesn't mean you can use that as an excuse to not sit on the cushion. That's still very important. That's an important part of the path, but it's not the whole path. Right? The Noble Eightfold Path is a holistic path. All these different modes. Right? So sitting on the cushion, doing your walking meditation, investigating, keeping that mindset of mindfulness and investigation in all of your other activities. Then you are fully doing the practice, or at least are have the possibility of doing the practice at all times. So yeah, I mean, you live most of your life off the cushion, right? So most of your practice is going to be off the cushion. I still have more years doing this practice as a layperson than a monastic. I think I got maybe 3 or 4 years before my monastic life equals my lay life in terms of practice. Maybe it's just a couple years now. I don't know. The next year will be 10 years that I left for the monastery. So time is really flying. All right. I don't give any excuses. I don't accept any excuses from lay people because I was a lay person with a busy job and I still practice. You can pull that on somebody who's been a monk since they were really, really young. It never had an experienced an adult life, but you can't pull that off on me. Ah, Ned, the story of my life. Bhante, when the mind has become quite still, I can feel jhana coming, and like a yo-yo, it goes away because I get so excited. The excitement makes my mind disturbed. What to do? Thank you. This is, I guess, a good time for me to. This is very similar to my own experience. So, normally monastics can't talk about, their attainments, like getting into jhanas directly. But since this is a story about me not getting into jhanas, I could talk about this one. And this is probably 13 years ago. I had been getting into a good calm mind state over a period of probably about a week. I started to notice that my mind was becoming very calm. I was doing my practice, even throughout the day, that I'm working and things like that. This was not in a retreat. And I was state, which I now believe is access concentration, or Bhante J calls it jhanic quality. So you're not in jhana, but you're close. You're in the neighborhood. That's another way some people put it. And I wasn't even thinking about jhana. At that point in my practice, I was like, jhana is for like some like really far away. I barely, actually, I even kind of intentionally didn't want to learn a lot about jhana because it wasn't something on my radar. And I'm sitting at my desk at work before work. I always went to work about an hour early, and most of my meditation was done outside, before work. And this time, I think it was raining so badly that I went inside at my desk. And I'm just following my breath, definitely in this kind of jhanic quality concentration. And I see the nimitta. The nimitta comes up. And it's not like you close your eyes and you see light through your eyelids. It's like you see this 4K, or are they past 4K now? I don't know TVs, 8K, 12K, this 4K like crystalline light that is just right in my my field of awareness. And I knew enough about jhana to know, oh, some people have a nimitta before they enter jhanas. And as soon as I thought, holy crap, really, I'm here? Excitement, gone. It was just gone. And I've never gotten back to this day. I remember after that, I was like, okay, I have to sign up for Bhante J's jhana retreat. And I learned a lot there. That was great. But I remember I asked multiple monastics, the monastics of Bhavana. I even asked Ajahn Brahm. I was sitting in the back of a car with him a bunch of years ago in New York City as we were driving back from one of his talks. And I asked him about this. And he said, you have to work on this. Bhante J basically said the same thing. You have to work on this until your excitement goes away. Meaning that you keep the repetitions over and over and over. You just keep coming back, keep developing so you get to, that point. And then you kind of have a bit of equanimity. You're like, okay, I'm here. Not, oh my God, I'm here. Yes, this is awesome. I'm going to be the best lay practitioner because I can get here. I'm going to be the coolest monk because I can, all these kind of things that are connected with getting into jhanas. You have to overcome those. That's a hindrance. Right? That's a hindrance of, kamachanda, the kind of desire. That's a hindrance of uddhacca kukucca, the restlessness and remorse. So what happened was you got close, but the hindrances came up. And Bhante J, the way Bhante J explains these things is, like the first time you get into jhana, you're just instantly gone. You just get knocked right out because the hindrances are so powerful. And you keep going back. You go back in, and so you master that. And so basically what it is, it's a matter of repetition to get past that excitement. And working with the hindrances. You have to know how the hindrances arise, what it's like when it's in your mind, what it's like when it ceases, all these things. Since that point, when I sit down, other than following my breath, my main practice is understanding the hindrances. Working with the hindrances and understanding ways to overcome them. Because that's the way that you get into jhanas. That jhana retreat that I told you about with Bhante J, that it was 9 days. We never heard the word jhana once until day 5. After Bhante had gone through all the hindrances. And then he started talking technically it would be day 6. There's 5 hindrances, 4 jhanas, 9-day retreat. That's how important working and understanding the hindrances are. You work on the hindrances, you do your repetitions, you get off that, you get off that energy, that excitement that arises, and then your mind won't be disturbed. Yes, dude. Whoever said that, it's probably best to ask them. Yeah, I don't know. I'm sure there's some logic to it. I just can't think of any logic to it. Delays says, is there any progress to be made when I am sitting for less than an hour a day and the mind keeps running around during that short period of sitting? Sure. Well, if you actually are consistently sitting for an hour a day, that's already major progress. That's pretty good. within that hour, how much of that hour seems that you're developing it pretty good, right? Is throughout that whole hour the mind is running around? Examine that. Your mind is going to sway. Your mind is going to get distracted. But if you keep coming back, you're doing the practice. The practice is staying with the breath, but part of staying with the breath is, well, you get distracted, you come back. So the distractions are not something taking you away from the practice. They are your practice. And the more you do that, the more you train your mind. Like you train a dog, to fetch or to, pee in the right place or whatever. You train a baby, you train whatever, you train yourself in a skill. The more you do that, the more the mind inclines towards that. You don't have to force it so much, right? You don't have to try to push it. You're just training the mind. You're getting in the reps, like you're lifting weights or something. You're getting in the reps. And over time, the mind will start to choose to incline towards being calm and quiet and following the breath. And remember, if you don't have a mindfulness practice, I highly suggest you develop a mindfulness practice. It's very important, right? Develop the mindfulness practice that you all day, every day, as long as you're awake, you can practice. I wrote an article about similar things about that, about kind of the mindset of developing an attitude that you can develop your mindfulness at any time. I'll put the link in the description. It's the simile of the ember. Those of you who are not new to me have probably heard that a bunch of times. Hello, Amaranta. Hello, Marky. Hello, Burke. Bhante, is light pinpointed size or a floodlight type portion? For me, it was like a crystal. Like it was like kind of like a cluster of crystals that were moving around and things like that, or like a star, like that kind of crystal-like star image that you might have. The nimitta is not important though. This is another trap for the jhanas. You get wrapped up in the nimittas, right? And some people don't have nimittas. The idea that you see a nimitta before you get into jhana isn't even in the suttas. It's in the Visuddhimagga, but it's not in the suttas. That doesn't mean that it doesn't happen. I mean, I would have probably been inclined to just go with the suttas beforehand, but it happened to me, so I have to be like, same thing with jhanic-like concentration or access concentration. Technically not in the suttas, but I've experienced it myself, so What is the difference between jhana and cessation? Well, it depends on what type of cessation. There's lots of cessation. There's permanent cessation. So when you get into jhanas, as I was explaining the fourth jhana, pleasure and pain are have ceased. Likes and dislike have ceased, but it's not permanent. As soon as you get out of the jhanas, it comes back. When you become awakened, then it permanently ceases. So there's different levels of ceasing, temporary, permanent. That cessation is used in a bunch of different contexts in the suttas. I have difficulty understanding jhana. It's okay. It can be complicated. It's not an easy thing to understand, especially if you haven't experienced it yourself. Um, I mean, I can't say that I fully understand jhanas. I've not been to the fourth jhana. All I know is, what Bhante J has taught me and what the suttas have taught me. That's all I know about that. Um, it's okay. So don't worry about if you have difficulty understanding jhana. The main point is to develop, understand the hindrances, overcome them, calm and tranquilize your mind. And when you do that, jhanas will arise. You don't get jhanas. Jhanas, like everything else, or almost everything else at least, are dependently arisen, meaning that you have to set the groundwork, the causes and conditions for them to arise, and then they arise on their own. You don't have to do anything special. So you have to set the groundwork first. Sud, you're hopeless in Satipatthana? I don't believe that. I've seen your questions for too long to think that you're hopeless in Satipatthana. For those of us who are hopeless in the Satipatthana, since we have many defilements, is there an alternative? How far do you think one can progress on the path with metta? So metta has two modes. Metta has a samatha mode where it's good for tranquilizing and calming the mind. And metta has the mode of eroding and um, picking out ill will and hatred and resentment and all these really aversive mind states from the mind. None of this is really a mindfulness practice. You could use metta, like the Buddha does in a sutta. The Buddha does say that you can use metta as a springboard for developing vipassana. And he goes that one of the reflections is that this metta is impermanent. This metta is unsatisfactory. This metta is not self. So anicca, dukkha, anatta. So you're reflecting that this metta is dependently originated, and when the causes and conditions cease, the metta will cease. So that's you'd have to take that extra step of bringing in mindfulness for metta to fulfill that that progress. Hello, Dhamma USA. Is that Bhante? Hello, Bhante. All right. And hello, Bhante Dhammaratna. Hmm. A bit of a semantical question, but an interesting one nonetheless. Why are these seven factors called factors of enlightenment? There are no factors in enlightenment. Well, I would say there's no factors in in terms of, or there might be no factors in terms of parinibbana, but I believe that even the Buddha, the Buddha had, it says unremitting mindfulness, right? These qualities are perfected. So the Buddha had these qualities as part of, I can't say to after he left his final body about that, but he had those qualities, in his mind still when he was, you know, alive and teaching. So I think that's where you would say that they're of enlightenment. But you could also say that they're for enlightenment in terms of those are what you need to develop to become awakened. All right. So we've come to the end of the chat. I'll give it a couple minutes more to see if any questions pop up. And if no questions pop up, we'll call it a night. Hello, Jerf. Jerf Mert. How am I? I'm in samsara. I haven't been able to escape it yet. I'm existing. Hello, Anna. Hello, Maddie. All right. Well, I guess we can end here for tonight. I'll be back again next Wednesday. And after that, I'll be at Empty Cloud for a couple weeks. So I'm sure they'll throw me on a bunch of live streams then. No rest for the wicked, as they say. But it's okay. So, friends, with that, Suki Hotu, may you be well and at ease. Practice well and be well. May you have a spiritually successful and peaceful practice until we meet again. Have a good night.